It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Welcome to Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. We believe that retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. Well, I'm your host, Jared Sebest. I'm the co-founder of Retire Repurposed alongside Ben Tejas. Thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe you found us on the radio. Maybe you're listening to us online. Regardless, head over to iTunes, find our podcast, click subscribe, and better yet, leave us a quick positive rating and review. If you just take a moment and do that, we would appreciate that so much. Now, this podcast, it is all about retirement, but it's not about money. It's about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. Few people can just flip the switch from working a career for 30, maybe 40 plus years, saving for retirement, having purpose, having an identity, and then shutting it off on Retirement Friday without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. If you want more for your life and your retirement, then you have come to the right place. Well, on this episode, we continue our series on optimizing retirement. Today, we cover the idea that retirement is not all about the numbers. Oftentimes, retirement planning becomes a game of tracking interest rates, rates of return, the stock market, net worth, etc., and less about the human value and purpose of each retiree and person. In this podcast, Ben explains 3 dangers you will encounter if you make life and retirement all about the numbers. Enjoy this episode. All right, folks, we are back and we are continuing this mini-series on optimizing retirement. This is episode number 5 of this mini-series, and today we're going to talk about it's not all about the numbers, and we're going to give you 3 dangers if you happen to make retirement all about the numbers. Just another reminder, we've got a brand new Facebook group called Becoming Repurposed in Retirement. Join a growing community of people that refuse to accept the typical American dream retirement. Look for more tips on living repurposed, Facebook Lives, Q&A sessions. Go to Facebook and search Becoming Repurposed. Again, facebook.com, search Becoming Repurposed in Retirement. Click join to be part of this community of people ready to make their retirement everything it was supposed to be. Ben Tejas joins me on the show here today, Ben, and again, this is episode number 5, and it started back on episode 99 where we talked about this idea of the ant and the grasshopper, 2 very different characters in a childhood story that has a lot to do with people in retirement and leading up to retirement.
Yeah, I mean, that started us down this, kind of visioning what's the ideal retirement, how do people live, how do they spend money, how do they, all these discussions we've been having come back to that discussion where basically the fable would have you believe that the ant did everything right by, over-preparing and preparing for the future, whereas the grasshopper, did not because he ended up out in the cold without food. And I noticed reading the fable, hey, the ant's lifespan is three months. Mm-hmm. And so he prepared and prepared and prepared for something he would never get to enjoy. And you kind of think about retirees sometimes in that regard. I think today's show, when we get into kind of the numbers of retirement, I have that feeling sometimes when I talk to retirees.
Yeah, there is a delicate balance between saving for tomorrow and living for today. And that's really what optimizing retirement's all about. And to do that, we've concluded that you've got to optimize your life wherever you are. If you want to have a phenomenal retirement, you've got to have a phenomenal life leading up to retirement. That led us into episode number 11, or number 100, where we talked about the time, money, health conundrum, because at any given time in our life, we've got differing amounts of these 3, and how crucial it is to not life defer until later because your health starts to decline naturally no matter what as you age.
Yeah, Jerry, I think when I look at those 3, it keeps coming up as I meet with more and more people just how important health is, and I think that was something I took away from that episode.
Yeah. Then the idea is not wait to have life until retirement. That's the big one there. So again, and there's a separate psychology element to this, and like you mentioned, we're going to get into that in today's show. But if you live with this life deferral mindset throughout life where I'm just going to save and defer life for retirement, even when retirement comes, many times we still can't break away from that mindset, and the ultimate loss is really a life that is unfulfilled. And so this danger of optimizing life certainly isn't just for the retiree.
Yeah, and the assumption is that I'm saving for some day that will be better. I'll better be able to use the money. I'll better be able to use my time. I'll better be able to, my health will stay where it's at. And we know that it doesn't always work that way. Many times we see that just the opposite is true as we age, and we need to be living today and not doing too much of that life deferral.
Sadly, your life or your health can go down so much where you can't do a lot of the things that you deferred life to. And then also too, which is kind of sad, sometimes you don't want to. And, and we even think that in our age, Ben, it's like all these things that we want to do, and we'll do those someday. But, the things that I wanted in life when I was in high school, I don't want those things anymore. And those things don't excite me. And there's an element of loss there that we need to be aware of. That led us into episodes 101 and 102, where we talked about finding meaning. We gave 3 ways to find meaning, one of which was serving and having experiences, but also suffering in episode 101. And then we talked about the foundation of meaning last week. And again, I want to spend some time on this. We can have this philosophical conversation about all these different ways to find meaning, but at the end of the day, if you don't have purpose, having really meaning in life or retirement, it's going to be really, really futile.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part, I think, for retirees is when they come into this new stage of life. Many of them took a great deal of meaning from the work they were doing. That wasn't probably their calling, but it was their purpose for a time where they spent time working, whatever that is. They were leading people, they were running a business, potentially they were teaching, whatever they were doing, and they were taking great meaning from the work they were doing. It was a purposeful life. And all of a sudden retirement comes, you walk away from that, and we've seen so many times where that meaning gets lost.
Well, there's 2 ways to look at it. You could have purpose while working, and lots of times your work will do that. And so you've got to replenish that in retirement. Or you could look at it from the flip side. You've got to have purpose while working. Because if you're not working with purpose and living with purpose and preparing for retirement with purpose, it's going to be hard to flip that switch on in retirement. Either way, there's dangers there. But regardless, you got to have the purpose side in retirement. That doesn't go away just because you stopped working or turned 65.
Yeah, it shouldn't start or stop at retirement. It should be, your life should have purpose in it. And I think that's what we're trying to make sure people recognize, and that they, if today you're listening to this and you're not nearing retirement, you understand how important it is to be part of something bigger than yourself, how important it is to serve others, how important it is to, have something that you are doing that is bigger than you. It's impossible to really be significant or to feel significant if you're being selfish. And that is something I think people need to always hear.
Yeah. Last point we made at the end of last week's show was that if you live with purpose now, before retirement is going to look totally different. And not only is it going to look different, it's going to look a lot better. So if you missed those shows, again, go back to episode 99, The Ant and the Grasshopper, and listen to the shows ever since then, because we keep building on this idea of optimizing retirement. So go check those shows out. So on today's show, we're going to talk about, it's not all about the numbers. Ben, we sketched out 3 major talking points here today. But before we do that, I've always encouraged listeners to actually Google the word retirement. And I got to tell you, if you do that, you will find pages and pages of really just financial articles, financial calculators. It's really all about the numbers.
Yeah, it is. I think every time that I tell people what I do for a living, I work with retirees, they right away assume that everything we do has to do with numbers. And while that is part of our work, there is a greater part of our work as well, which has nothing to do with numbers.
Right.
So I think when you Google retirement, you will get every financial company out there trying to push their particular products upon you, and look at your own savings, look at your own nest egg, and they want a piece of that, right? So what we're saying today is it can be quite a bit, and retirement should be looked at that is one part of it, but not necessarily even the biggest part of retirement.
Well, think about the word retirement and even personal finance. What makes that important is the personal part of it. Again, you're a human being. You have a life. You were created by our Creator. I mean, there's so much dynamic in the life. To just boil a season of life or life down to numbers, again, is just not the right worldview on that. So we're going to kind of bust some myths here today and bring some truth to this numbers game. The first point we wanted to bring up here today is that if retirement becomes all about the numbers, it can create what we call an identity crisis. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think sometimes when folks come into retirement and they lose some of that identity that they did get from work, they start to spend way more time finding identity in their net worth. Their self-worth becomes their net worth. We see that because that's a time when they potentially have saved more than they've ever had. They've had this goal potentially of saving a certain amount of money so that they can retire, but now that becomes more of who they are, or at least they're putting some value of their life upon whatever the numbers say on that statement.
I don't think that people do this intentionally. Would you agree? Like, this isn't like an intentional thought where they're like, you know what, I've got to find my identity and my purpose in something else, so I'm going to do it on my bank account. It's just kind of something that naturally happens. If one part of our life is taken away, it's going to naturally get replaced by something, and it seems like money is kind of the easy target.
Yes, something always will replace, right? When there's empty, when there's a hole, something fills that void.
Yeah.
So typically what happens is you remove that purpose and you start to fill it with something else, and that thing becomes a bigger part of your life.
Yeah. Well, again, if you have free time, chances are, if we got a little more free time, what are we doing? We're probably, maybe scrolling online a little bit more, maybe watching a little bit more TV. And again, there's no shortage of the negative headlines to get your mind maybe wrapped in the numbers or fear of the numbers more than today. So if you look at it from that perspective, it can make a lot of sense. Point number 2 here today is that the numbers can promote a scarcity mindset. We've kind of talked about this just a little bit, but this is a big one. In fact, I think we could probably make an entire show about this. The scarcity mindset is something that I think if you're not careful, because of how we view saving for retirement, can kind of take over and control how you think and how you spend and how you live in retirement.
Yeah, Jared, many times when I meet with retirees, we'll start the conversation with small talk, and typically it's how's your day going? And one of the things that has come up recently, while the markets have been volatile and down, has been, well, it hasn't been a very good day. And I hear that. It's like, well, it's been a bad day. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Tell me about that. And what I'm expecting is potentially a health scare, or there's something significant in their family, or there's something, whatever that might be. Certainly not why I'm getting the answer, which has been, you saw the markets, what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I do get that. And my heart just breaks for those guys, because I'm like, no, you can't put so much weight upon how you feel and how you go about your day based on what the market is doing. When I hear that, I know that there is an element of them tying their identity and how they feel about themselves or others or their day based on these numbers, which, again, it's just not a positive way to live.
Well, again, that could go the other way too, where they're having a great day. Why are you having such a great day today? What happened? Well, the markets are up, and I quote unquote made more money today. And it's like, it's kind of the same side of it's a different side of the same coin.
It is. I mean, either one's bothersome, right? Because you should not be changing how you feel about your life based on that element. Most of the people I'm having those conversations with will probably never even be able to spend the wealth that they've created.
Yeah.
So regardless of if things were good or bad that
That's
day,
true.
It won't make a huge difference because they're never going to spend it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So again, when we spend the time worrying and taking the time to really make our retirement about the numbers, I think sometimes, like you said, it can promote a scarcity mindset where you start to pull back the reins on everything, pull back the reins on living, pull back the reins on your giving, all these things that are so important to you when you start to feel like, your retirement is about those numbers.
These are actual numbers, mean net worth by age. You check out many studies on this online, and you're going to see the same basic trends. But net worth typically will go up, through kind of your, mid ages, through your 40s and your 50s, and it typically peaks right around that time of your typical retirement in your mid 60s. And then it kind of does something interesting. It plateaus, or even some studies show that net worth by age will actually start to go up a little bit over the next 10 to 15 years. Bottom line is that people are retiring and they're holding on to their money. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. How do you want to start this conversation?
Well, I think that tells me we've got a massive problem, really. I think in how people view money, how they look at wealth and income. I wrote about this in my book, and I think it's a really important thing for people to really enjoy their retirement. They have to get beyond the scarcity mindset and get beyond this idea of, I've saved it and now it must stay at the same value. Mm-hmm. So when people don't understand the difference between wealth and income, it leads to a whole host of problems with how they give charitably, with how they spend, how they enjoy life, how they give to their kids.
It kind of goes back to this idea of like, what's the point of making the money, saving the money for all these years if we're not going to spend it and put it to use? Holding it just seems kind of pointless in a lot of ways.
Yeah, something Bill Gates said, and this comes from one of the wealthiest mans in the world. He said, I can, and this is a quote from him, I can understand wanting to have $1 million. But once you get beyond that, I have to tell you, it's the same hamburger. Really, what he's saying there is, at a certain point, it does you no good, you as a person, any good just increasing your wealth. And there's a biblical backing to this too.
Sure.
I mean, you want to talk about wisdom, go back to Ecclesiastes 5, verse 11. It says there, as goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owner except to feast his eyes upon them?
Right,
that
exactly.
is the definition of wealth, isn't it?
Exactly.
As things increase, you just get bigger.
Yeah.
And that goalpost moves, and the next thing.
Yeah.
That is really looking at money from a wealth standpoint versus income.
And again, with all due respect to retirees and people that check their account balances just to stare at it and feel good because that number is high or going up, that's not the heart condition that we want to be in. So this idea of scarcity, I think anybody listening to this, whether young, old, middle age, you have to try to identify where you have the scarcity mindset in your life. But it shows up so much in the retirement world because, again, you accumulate a lot of wealth and then all of a sudden you can't spend it. Let's go through some reasons. Why do you think people can't spend it besides maybe just this idea of, I can't let go of it?
Well, number one, there is always a fear of running out. I mean, many people that have wealth today, and specifically in that age group, were raised by people who actually lived the Great Depression. They were either the folks that walked through the Great Depression and had, talk about a scarcity mindset. There was real scarcity, right? So they were raised by those individuals. So I think that's certainly in the back, really in the background of a lot of these people's decisions.
Yeah. Oh, it's fear, and that's another thing that we shouldn't be making financial decisions on, is based on fear. And maybe a lot of them even know that they couldn't run out of money, but I do think that fear is still very prevalent, and the world and the news certainly doesn't help that anymore. But that's kind of a mindset of scarcity that we have to be aware of. Another one could be, Ben, just kind of autopilot, like this is what everybody's doing. Again, everybody just tries to build wealth and then hold on to it as long as we can, as hard as we can. And that's not necessarily a reason to do it just because everybody else may be doing it.
No, when we get caught in autopilot, any decision should be made for a specific reason. So when you're just kind of stuck, that's a problem, right? So I think when they feel like you're just conditioned to do this over and over and not make a change, that is definitely a reason that I see with people just not using the wealth they've created.
I'd have to believe the biggest reason, or a big reason, that people would come to you and not want to, have their wealth go down at a certain age is that they want to leave more to the kids. But there's some fallacies in that as well. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that one comes up a lot. It's like when I encourage people to really transition this thought process from wealth to income and begin using and enjoying the money that they've saved, it does many times come back to, but the kids, we got to remember the kids. We got to save a bunch for them. And I feel like the most selfish way to give is to give when you die. So like, I'm going to hold on to everything because it's mine, and I'm kind of holding on to this. and then when I pass away, then they can have it. They can have what's left over, versus coming a completely different approach and saying, I want them to enjoy this money now. I want them to, build a plan where they can see and use the funds today, and that goes for your charities too.
Right.
You want to, if that's on your heart, and you want to be making a big kingdom impact by giving to charities, don't wait until you pass away someday, because then you don't get to see it, and it's just not how you should give.
Well, not only do you not get to see it, they need that money right now. And going back to even the life perspective on health, time, and money, I think we mentioned this on previous shows. The average age of receiving an inheritance is 61 years old. Which, again, makes a lot of sense because you have aging parents in your 80s, they die, and then you receive an inheritance when you're in your 60s. That is not the prime time to get an inheritance. A prime time would be much younger. Even if it's less money, giving that money to your children while you're alive and they're younger, they're going to be able to utilize that money better. And you get to see them use it and coach them and prepare that next steward. That's a huge part of wealth transfer.
Yeah, preparing the next steward that is wealth transfer. So when you can do that properly, it doesn't look anything like most people give to their children, where it's like, yeah, we'll give a little bit now, whatever the federal government allows us to give per year without filing a gift tax return. We hear that a lot. And then whatever that is, that's fine. But when we have significant wealth, it needs to go well beyond that many times.
Right.
And I think the kids can use it today.
So what do you say when people say, I don't want to spend my money in retirement because I want my kids to have it? How do you rebuttal that? How do you prove that point that what you are spending isn't their money?
Jared, it starts with realizing, or helping them realize, you're not spending their money. If you've done your planning properly, you have decided what you need and what you want to spend and live for the rest of your life. But there's a chunk there that you're not needing and that you are considering their money already. Okay, don't spend that, but put that aside and give that to them either now or in a period of payments, or some, depending on how they are doing with the money and what stage of life they're in. But certainly don't just do the other way where you just like save it until the very end and then just dump it all on them.
I think that's the biggest reason between, again, a trust and a wealth transfer plan. And that's why, again, not to offend anybody, but waiting until death is a little bit more of a selfish way to look at it, because, again, we're not being as intentional with the money we're giving away. We're just saying you're going to get whatever's left. And I know that's not what people are saying, but that's kind of the essence of it. It's a much more intentional way to give, to say, this is how much I have in the bank, and I'm allotting this to my children, my heirs, my charities, and I'm going to choose to give it to them sooner than later. Because the truth is, if people are thinking about this, they could live another 10, 20 years, which would be phenomenal, but that's another 10 or 20 years that those charities and people can't utilize it. It's so much more of an effective way, and you've helped a lot of people do this, and it's not only is a lot of fun, it's more impactful for the person giving the money, and it's also more impactful to the charities or people that are receiving the money.
Yeah, everybody wins when you can properly build out that wealth transfer plan. So the first step, though, Jared, like you said, it's helping people define, and understand that you are not a series of numbers. You are an individual with certain goals and needs. And if charity, and certainly if your children are part of that, where you want your net worth to go, then you have to build that in. But it starts with helping them see you're not a set of numbers. You're an individual who has certain goals and dreams, and we have to address them.
We got about a minute and a half left here. We talked about how the numbers can create an identity crisis, how it can promote a scarcity mindset. The last point we want to make here today is that if retirement or life becomes all about the numbers, it kind of makes it hard to live with purpose at the same time, and we've seen this.
Yeah, I think when it gets to be a major distraction in somebody's life and really a purpose on itself, like your purpose is for the numbers. I know I've had times in my life, even building the financial business, where the goal was let's have a certain number of millions of dollars that we manage. The goal became numbers. The purpose became numbers. Right. A lot different. Over about 7 years ago, made a complete shift where now the goal was helping people. So when you build a business to create money it's a very difficult thing to do. When you create a business to help people, it becomes a very easy thing to do and a very rewarding thing, and typically the numbers follow. Same thing with the retiree, Jared. If I'm a retiree and I am putting so much effort and purpose into, maintaining a net worth or, watching my numbers so much, that becomes my purpose. And unfortunately, we know that's not the type of purpose that will lead to real lasting significance.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Retire Repurposed. Want more information or a copy of Ben's book, Repurpose, The Untold Story of Retirement in America? Go to our website, retirerepurposed.com. Until next time, I'm Jared Sebesta. Remember, don't retire, become repurposed. We'll see you then.